Mary Collins was publicly humiliated and tied up for stealing bread to feed her 5 starving children, a harsh punishment that revealed the town's cold cruelty. Sheriff David Turner's rigid enforcement showed a lack of mercy, turning justice into cruelty that shocked everyone who witnessed it. But then Jack Harper, the infertile and isolated ranger, stepped in and changed everything by taking responsibility for the children and challenging the town's harsh judgment. Just wait until you see how this unexpected act of courage turned the tide, and why justice ultimately found its way back to Millersville. In the fading light of a late summer afternoon, the small town of Millersville lay quiet beneath the vast Midwestern sky. The streets were dusty, the wooden storefronts weathered by years of sun and wind. At the edge of town, the old bakery, once the heart of the community, now stood as a symbol of hardship, its shelves emptier than they used to be. Mary Collins moved silently through the shadows, clutching her thin coat tightly against the chill that crept in with the evening. A widow barely scraping by, Mary's face was etched with exhaustion, her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached the bakery's side door. Hunger gnawed fiercely at her insides, a desperate ache she could no longer ignore. Inside, a single loaf of bread sat forgotten on a shelf. Soft, warm, and life-saving. Mary glanced around. No one was watching. For the sake of her 5 children, Ellie 9, Tommy 7, Sarah 5, little Luke 3, and baby Anna, she took the bread and slipped away into the darkening street. But the town was watching. The sheriff, David Turner, was swift and unyielding. Known for his strict enforcement of the law and little patience for excuses, he caught Mary before she could reach her home. Without hesitation, he ordered her brought back to the town square. That evening, under the unforgiving glare of the setting sun, Mary was tied to a post in the center of Millersville's main square. The rough ropes bit into her wrists, securing her firmly, making her a public spectacle. Nearby, townsfolk gathered, some curious, some disapproving, others silently judging. Children clung to their mothers' skirts, sensing the weight of the moment, but not fully understanding. Mary's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the heavy shame that threatened to crush her. Her hands trembled, and tears welled up as she looked out at the crowd, her neighbors, her friends, her community. Why had it come to this? Her husband John had died suddenly last winter. A factory accident had taken him away, leaving Mary alone to raise their 5 children with no savings and no steady income. Bills piled up, cupboards remained empty, and the harsh reality of poverty closed in like a tightening noose. Each day was a battle against hunger and hopelessness. Stealing was a line Mary never thought she would cross. But when the hungry cries of her children echoed through their tiny home, survival became the only option. Yet in Millersville, law and order stood above all else. Sheriff Turner's cold gaze held no room for mercy. To him, the rules were clear. Theft was theft, and punishment must be swift and public to maintain order. The crowd murmured as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the square. Some whispered in sympathy, others looked away, uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The injustice was undeniable. A mother punished for feeding her starving children, yet the silence was deafening. Among the onlookers, only one man felt compelled to break that silence. Jack Harper was no stranger to solitude. For years, the dense forest surrounding Millersville had been his refuge and his home. A local forest ranger, Jack knew every tree, every hidden trail, and every whisper of the wild. Yet, despite his closeness to nature, he remained distant from the town that bordered his woods. The reason for Jack's isolation was no secret. After years of heartbreaking and failed attempts to start a family, he was known as the man who could not have children. In a community where family was everything, this invisible wound marked him as different, and in their eyes, less. Whispers followed him wherever he went. Cold, distant, unlucky, a man to be pitied or ignored. But on that scorching afternoon, when Jack saw Mary Collins tied to the post in the town square, something inside him ignited. A fierce, blazing hatred, not towards Mary, the woman suffering under the merciless sun, but towards the town itself, towards the harsh justice that showed no mercy, and towards the sheriff who wielded the law like a weapon. This was not justice, it was cruelty masquerading as order. Jack's heart ached as he watched the crowd, silent and indifferent, accepting the spectacle as normal. How had Millersville become so cold? That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack moved quietly through the shadows back to Mary's small, worn-down home. The shack was modest, barely sheltering 6 lives, but within its fragile walls lived hope and love. Despite hunger and hardship, Jack carried with him a small basket, simple food and water, enough to ease the gnawing emptiness that had driven Mary to desperation. He left the basket at the doorstep, pausing only to place a gentle hand on the doorframe as if offering a silent promise of solidarity. Word spread quickly, as it often does in small towns. Whispers floated through Millersville's streets. Who was this man daring to challenge the sheriff's iron will? Who had the courage to care when others turned away? Jack knew the path ahead would be lonely. His neighbors would judge him harshly for breaking the unspoken rules, for siding with a thief, a mother who dared steal to feed her children. But in his heart, Jack understood what justice truly meant. Compassion in the face of suffering. That night, as the stars shimmered over the forest, Jack's quiet rebellion had begun. The following morning dawned heavy and still, as the townsfolk gathered once again in the dusty square of Millersville. The sun climbed steadily, casting long shadows over the cracked wooden posts where Mary Collins remained bound, a symbol of the town's harsh judgment and unforgiving law. The murmurs and glances of the crowd filled the tense air. Some looked on with cold approval, convinced that justice was being served. Others whispered doubts, but no one moved to challenge the scene. Until Jack Harper stepped forward. There was a quiet power in Jack's presence, calm yet resolute. The crowd fell into an uneasy silence as he approached Mary's ropes, the harsh twine cutting into her skin and spirit. Without hesitation, Jack took out a small knife and carefully sliced through the bindings. The ropes fell away like chains breaking free, and Mary's wrists were finally released. A stunned gasp rippled through the crowd. Jack faced them, voice steady but raw with emotion. "I'm taking them. The children, I mean," he said simply. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. The townspeople exchanged shocked looks. Why would Jack, the infertile ranger who had lived on the fringes, willingly take on 5 children, especially those tied to a woman accused of stealing? Jack's eyes, usually so guarded, softened as he spoke. "I've carried a loneliness in my heart that no one sees. Years of trying, hoping, and losing. I can't give birth to my own children, but I can give these kids a chance at a life filled with love, not chains." His voice was unwavering, each word a declaration of his deep compassion and quiet strength. Sheriff David Turner's lips curled into a sneer, his pride wounded by Jack's defiance. But even the sheriff could not ignore the stir of uncertainty spreading through the crowd. Jack's courage and honesty were cracks in the town's hardened facade. Mary looked up at Jack, tears streaming down her face, not only from relief, but from a flicker of hope she hadn't dared to feel in months. For the first time since her husband's death and her desperate act, she saw a future for her children beyond hunger and shame. Jack Harper, the man once judged and cast aside, had stepped into the light, and with that act, he had changed the fate of 5 lives and the soul of Millersville itself. In the weeks that followed, the town of Millersville witnessed a quiet but powerful transformation. Jack Harper faced relentless judgment from the sheriff and whispers from neighbors clinging to old grudges. Yet beneath the surface of suspicion and resistance, something began to change. Slowly, those who had once turned away now looked again. With new eyes, they saw the fierce determination in Jack's actions, the tenderness with which he cared for Mary's children, and the heartbreaking truth behind her desperate choice. The cold walls of indifference that had kept the town divided started to crack. Jack's small, weathered home became a sanctuary. He took in Ellie, Tommy, Sarah, Luke, and baby Anna with open arms and an unwavering commitment. Though nature had denied him the chance to father children of his own, Jack discovered a different kind of fatherhood, one chosen by heart and fought for with every ounce of his being. Every scraped knee tended to, every bedtime story told, every laugh shared forged a new family from the fragments of broken lives. His neighbors began to soften, grudging respect blossoming into quiet warmth. The man they had once dismissed as a loner was now a pillar of compassion and strength. The story culminated one crisp evening at a small community meeting. Mary stood beside Jack and the children, her voice steady and strong, carrying the weight of all they had endured. "Stealing bread was my crime," she said, "but leaving my children to starve would have been worse. Thanks to Jack, they have a chance, and so do I." Her words echoed through the room, a powerful reminder that justice was more than punishment. It was mercy. It was courage. It was love. In Millersville, a town once hardened by fear and rigid rules, a broken system was healed, not by law alone, but by the brave heart of an infertile ranger who chose to fight for what truly mattered. Justice had triumphed, and with it, a new family was born.